Yes, I'm a demographer. I am spending my days looking at the world from the zoomed out Google Earth perspective, looking at the big picture. But of course, as a demographer, I am legally required to show you a population chart. Ta-da! Here it is. Very, very simple visual. We have babies on the left-hand side of the chart, 100-year-old folks on the right-hand side. A simple understanding, but it's also a very boring graphic, isn't it? That's the status quo. Who cares about the here and now? We are much more interested into the future. We are much more interested in understanding what Australia looks like, what your businesses will look like in 10 years' time. The big bulge here in the 20s and 30s, by the way, are the millennials, the by far biggest generation. Forecasting our population is super easy in Australia. We know exactly how many of you will die every year. We know how many babies you're going to make this year. And as a nation, we dictate how many people we let into the country. So our forecasts will be pretty precise. And here is what government, the Centre for Population, bunch of demographers in Canberra, think Australia will look like in 10 years' time. The first bit of information is hiding in the top right corner. 3.5 million, maybe even 4 million more people in Australia. A rising tide lifts all boats. No matter the market that you're in, you should be seeing an increase of people that you sell stuff to. That is good news. But you also immediately realize that growth isn't evenly distributed across the whole age spectrum. We'll see roughly a stagnating number of kids, 0 to 15. There isn't all that much growth happening. We'll see strong growth in the young adult, 15 to 24-year-old market. That is essentially the sex, drugs, and rock and roll phase of the life cycle. And that growth will be very much driven by young migrants coming into Australia. These will be overwhelmingly young skilled migrants and international students. That covers essentially all of migration that we'll be seeing over the coming decade. We know exactly where they will be found. They will be moving near the one address that they know in Australia. It's either their university or it's their office tower. So all those new migrants move smack bang into the city centers of our biggest cities. And just in time they're doing this because the millennials are slowly vacating those inner cities. But so when we talk about the millennials, we see this big cohort of people in their 20s and 30s. Obviously, in 10 years' time, they're a decade older. And so we now reach a decade where the strongest growth market, the single year of age that will see most growth, are 43-year-olds. And isn't that great news? Because 43, statistically speaking, is such an interesting age. It is the time in your life where you're spending more money than ever before or ever after. Makes sense, doesn't it? At 43, you had a couple of promotions, so your income is reasonably high, but you also have 1.7 very hungry kids at home. They eat a lot of Weet Bix. They need a lot of cricket bats, school uniforms. The costs don't stop. Plus, you have a big fat mortgage. Every penny that you earn goes straight out the door, back into the economy. It's terrible news for the 43-year-olds, but it is great news for Australia. We just happen to go through the post-pandemic economic recovery phase just in time for the biggest cohort to reach the highest spending phase of the life cycle. We didn't do anything to deserve it, but heck, we'll take it. Huh? And they, of course, also will completely change the way they live, millennials, because they're now starting families. So they'll move away from the inner city apartments and hipsterized suburbia. They will do all of this. It's a bit cliche to say Australia is aging because you read this a million times already, but that is exactly what is happening. It looks very, very unspectacular on this chart. But if you look towards the right-hand side, we just look at the 85 plus segment. That segment is doubling over the next 12 years, so just a bit more than is shown on this chart. That is absolutely important to understand. Because the 85 is another beautiful statistical age. At 85, half of you, that half, will have died. The surviving half of you guys will require care, will require daily assistance with activity of everyday life. It is expensive to grow old for us as a country. That's clear. But it is also outrageously labor intensive. And technology can play an absolute crucial role to fight the skills shortage that we're facing. Because this chart really tells a story of a decade of suppressed skills availability in this country. Yes, there's this big bulge here of migrants in their 20s that are coming in. They're absolutely needed. Because what we're seeing here is we see a big fat generation, baby boomers, leave the world of work. That's cool, they're allowed to retire. People always retired. But this time around you have this big fat cohort retiring, while you have a tiny cohort entering the workforce at the other end. There's an obvious mismatch. As if this wasn't bad enough, millennials procrastinated so long with their baby making that they only started now, a couple of years ago really. So they have another 10 years left of baby making in the tank. That means they at least temporarily leave the workforce. So you have the skill squeeze continuing. This is terrible news if you thought of expanding your business, if you thought of hiring staff. That is challenging. This is where technology plays a role though. In this environment of a decade of skills shortages, how do you grow your business? Well, you'll try to automate as many tasks as possible. You try to have AI assist you. Connectivity, technology will become much, much more important, and it necessitates it, demographics. There's no chance that you can grow your business without doubling down on technology growth, because you can't rely on human little worker bees doing your business for you, because there are not that many around. Even though we're growing, even though we will see record migration intake this year, the force of retiring baby boomers is just that strong. It really hinders this growth otherwise. That means if you were, so to speak, in the business of providing technology, of assisting businesses, you'll have a very good decade ahead, because you will be very much needed. So now that we know of how many of us will be in Australia, let's think through where we will find ourselves. And since you are servicing the whole country, I can't show you a simple map of how your city looks like and changed over time. So we need to think about it in more general terms. And thank God all Australian cities work essentially the same. Before COVID, your city, whatever it is, looked like a fried egg. You had all the juicy, delicious jobs clustering in the egg yolk, in the CBD. And people, in order to avoid the soul-destroying commute, were willing to pay a premium to move as close to the egg yolk as possible. The poorer workers had to commute in longer distances into the egg yolk. That was terrible for traffic management. This created a star-shaped commuting pattern. Everyone in at the same time, everyone out at the same time. It is the worst way of planning a city. Usually at around 3.5 million people, a city stops functioning based on a single CBD model. Melbourne, Sydney people here know exactly what I'm talking about. But then along comes the pandemic. And the pandemic really was like we're taking a spatula to our fried egg and we're creating a scrambled egg city. We really took all those jobs from the office towers and put them into all those spare bedrooms, bathrooms, wherever people worked during the pandemic. And of course, all of a sudden, even the most reluctant bosses had to trust their workers to work from home. That was just a sign of the times. Of course, also that meant the CBD was emptying out. Plus, we made it very clear early on in the pandemic to our international visa holders that we're not going to extend financial assistance to them. So, of course, they left. Inner city bled out. People, after working from home for a little bit, realized, wait a second, why am I paying a premium to live near the office tower that I'm not going to anymore? So they stopped doing this. So they moved out. They moved to the regions. They moved to the urban fringe. We redistributed population. But why the hell am I talking about this? Isn't the pandemic, for all intents and purposes, over? Can we just skip this COVID stuff? Well, no, we can't, because I haven't mentioned that this exact same pattern would have occurred even without the pandemic. Because once again, there are simple demographics at play here. The single biggest driver of creating this scrambled egg city was millennials making babies. Millennials leaving the hipster suburbs of Surrey Hills, of Fitzroy behind, because you add 1.7 kids to your small apartment, it becomes crowded. So you need to find a 3- or 4-bedroom house. These houses are not available in the inner city. They're not available in the middle suburbs because that's where their very own baby boomer parents are hogging the 3 and 4 bedroom homes as empty nesters. They're not thinking of downsizing. The whole downsizing narrative is much exaggerated in this country. Australians, they will tell you stuff like, I want to be carried out of my house. That seems to be the ultimate life goal in Australia. I guess that's the ultimate downsizing into this small box. But more than anything, the downsizing will not happen at scale for the next decade because baby boomers are still too young, too healthy, too agile. So they will stay put. For the next decade, you will see the big movement of millennials from the inner city to the urban fringe. What does that mean for working from home? It means that they will fight you to not go to the office. They are not incentivized to go to the office. They're in the early family formation stage of the life cycle. That is when you go into a bit of cruise control in your career anyway. You want to spend more time with the family. You don't really push that hard for the next promotion. So you're happy to stay on the urban fringe. That means we need connectivity there. That means we'll see a big improvement of business parks, of working near home centers where you shorten the commute, but you allow people to come together for certain meetings to essentially access really fancy webinar facilities and so forth. This is going to happen for the next decade. The CBD, do we just need to board it all up and have nature take over again? No, we don't. Because if a city like Sydney grows at 100,000 people per year, Melbourne will grow at close to 130,000 people per year. Some of this growth will take place in the CBD. And not too little, to be honest. Because we take in knowledge workers. Those knowledge workers come here without families. Maybe they're coupled up, but usually they're single. They need small inner city dwellings. It'll be fine. It'll take a couple of years to reach pre-COVID levels. I can say this because I don't have billions of dollars invested into the inner city. But ultimately, the CBD will be fine. But the CBD will be a much more interconnected, much more human place. Because ideally, we don't go to work to the inner city to sit there with noise-canceling headphones writing emails. That's stupid. That's best done from home. So ideally, we split our work days to do the quiet writing, thinking tasks at home and do the interpersonal tasks in the CBD on certain kind of days. You can't perfectly match up your week this way, but if we do this more and more, you'll see the CBD become an increasingly lively, interpersonal, noisy, raucous place almost. And it's going to be quite nice because you only go to the CBD for the fun bits. So ultimately, the CBD will recover. But bosses from the past that go into the CBD of the future, they will get an instant heart attack because they figured nobody's doing any work. They're all just chit-chatting. But that is what technology is doing. Technology makes sure that we automate all those technical, repetitive tasks. And the humans, they don't leave the office at 3 p.m. You know, work, to misquote Jurassic Park, work finds a way to fill your day. But it does so with amping up those interpersonal tasks. So the more you provide technology solutions to the Australian workforce, the more the little individual workers will be left with interpersonal tasks. And so these skills will be setting workers apart into the future as well. So let's quickly, I forgot the tomato sauce. Look at me. Yes, the millennials will move to the urban fringe. They will even move to regional Australia, to a certain bunch of lifestyle cities. But not all of regional Australia will benefit. It literally is like we draw a magic 2-hour drive time radius around our egg with tomato sauce. People are not willing to move further than 2 hours away from the CBD because ultimately the hybrid model will win, not the complete working remotely model. There is an absolute need for human connection, human connectivity in work, and that's not going away. And people are willing to do an extreme commute of 2 hours or less, once or twice per week, but not longer. It is absolutely comical that you see towns that are 2 hours and 15 minutes away from a CBD see no growth at all. But everything within the 2 hours is boomtown territory. So, and that, of course, is written into the system and will continue working like this for the next decade. So now we need to think through the changing face, the changing nature of the Australian workforce. And in order to walk you through this, I want to take you back to my favorite day of the year, only comes around every 5 years actually. That's of course Census Day. On this most magical of nights, you were kindly asked to write your job down on the little census form. And our friends at the ABS, they took your answer, they put it into one of 1,300 categories. That's the number of jobs that officially exist in this country. Every single one of those jobs has a number attached to it, a number from 1 to 5, the so-called skill level. It indicates how much formal training is required for you to do this job. Skill level 1 jobs are the highest level. You need a uni degree to be a doctor, an engineer, a midwife. Skill level 3 jobs are the backbone of the Australian middle class. Your tradies, your manufacturing workers are skill level 3 workers. Skill level 4 jobs are low skilled work. You need some sort of qualification, maybe a driver's license to be a truckie. You need skill level 5 jobs. You need no formal qualification. They're so-called unskilled jobs. All you need to know for the job, you will learn on the job. The single best indicator in Australia for your income is your skill level, is your level of education. Education absolutely determines your income more than anything else. Yes, you all know a plumber. It's always a plumber that earns $300,000 a year. Good on him, but the guy is cheating because he actually isn't a little worker, he is a small business. He has 2 apprentices and another plumber working for him, getting him to $300,000. So that's the plumber legal asterisk here. In the 1980s, we had 23% of Australian jobs sitting in the skill level 1 university level job. The backbone of the Australian middle class was still nice and strong at 20%, and almost half of the population was working in low income skill level 4 and 5 jobs. How did the Australian workforce change over the last 40 years? Well, it completely transformed into a knowledge economy. By now, well over a third of all jobs require a university level education. If you just look at 29-year-olds, half of them have a job that require a university level education. We transition into a knowledge economy. Knowledge is king. These are increasingly technology heavy jobs. You are making all of this possible. Even the lower end of the jobs are increasingly connected in some way or form. We are growing the whole workforce as a beast like crazy. But now those skill level 1 jobs that were absolutely clustered in the CBD, they're now dispersing, at least temporarily throughout the week, in a more frequent way. That's important. But for you, this also shows who your customers are. The worst thing you can do in your service offering is to have a one-size-fits-all service offering, pretending that if you blindly target the center of the market, you'll hit them all. The Australian middle class shrank away over the last 40 years. It's literally the smallest market segment is the middle class. So increasingly, we have a two-tiered market. You can have marvelous times at the low-cost bottom end of the market. Yes, the margins are tiny, but it's still a big growth market, so you can operate there at scale. There is a big, fat growth in the top end of the market. These are people that will complain about rising costs of living, about house prices, but they will be absolutely fine. They will always have disposable income available. Things are just fine at the top third of the Australian workforce. No problem there. Margins are truly delicious at this end of the spectrum. So understand that the one-size-fits-all thing is the worst thing you can do. As a big, sizable company, you can, of course, play at both ends of the spectrum. You can also play at the center. But ideally, you have a varied service offering to make sure that you reach all of your customers. When we talk about customers, a couple of things changed with customers. Their behavior, their expectations changed a bit. Your expectations are outrageous, and so are the expectations of every single customer that you will ever be dealing with. It is harder than ever before to create a 5-star customer experience, simply because they demand so much. Of course, you need to deal with all of this, with those outrageous expectations in an environment where you have a big fat skills shortage, where stuff is expensive, rising cost of living, rising material costs, and so on. It's not easy. But I'm telling you this not because I have a solution. I'm just telling you this because I want you to have an honest understanding of the mindset of every single customer that you're dealing with. So to talk through the customers a bit further, let's think through the different generations, and let's think through their technology needs over the coming decade. We bunch everyone born before the end of the Second World War into a single generation. Let's call them the pre-boomers. They'll make up 6% of the population now, only 2% in 10 years' time. They well and truly reached the dying stage of the life cycle. Their main goal is relatively good health and ideally independent living. Technology can play a big role here if you think about independent lifestyles. If you can ensure that you have an Apple Watch or whatever it is that alerts your relatives of a fall, an interconnected house that can kind of dictate, kind of understand when your behavior deviates from your everyday routine, and so that your daughter, your son might be able to give you a buzz. All of those things enable people to live independently for longer. That is absolutely needed, because there is no way in hell that we have enough workers to look after our aging population. Absolutely out of the question. So we do need to find technology solutions to make sure that our oldest and most vulnerable citizens have a decent quality of life. And anything that we push out care needs for a year or two, that is helping massively. And so we do need well-connected homes for people that are not all that tech savvy. And they of course need the relevant equipment as well. And of course, the marketers here in the room, they will not miss those people as they leave the life stage, because they were a terrible generation to be doing business with, huh? They only purchased the stuff that they needed. Boo, that never was fun. It was always more fun to deal with the next people down the track, the baby boomers. The baby boomers are, though I must say, quite often miscategorized as a purely materialistic generation. You want to remember who brought those baby boomers up. Their parents saw World War I. They saw World War II. And for good measure, in the middle, we threw in the Great Depression. So no wonder that they measured their success in life against a bit of a materialistic yardstick. And they really had it well, baby boomers growing up. Economic boom times, cheap houses. They were also the first generation where women entered the workforce at scale. So all of a sudden, Australia went from 1 household income to 1.5 household incomes. And that money was essentially spent on labor-saving devices, your vacuum cleaners, your fridges, washing machines, and cars. That enabled Australian cities to sprawl like crazy, because all of a sudden, even low-income households had a car, and they could sprawl into what is now the middle suburbs of our cities. There was the outskirts back then, so we really sprawled out Australia like crazy. So if you will, these sprawled out cities, baby boomers are to blame. But in 10 years' time, even the youngest baby boomer will be officially of retirement age. Doesn't mean that they're all retired. They'll still be hanging around in company boards. They'll still have talkback radio shows. But more than anything, the cultural, social influence of baby boomers is well on the way out. So we're seeing the last generation that really cares about hierarchies leaving the stage of work. That means if your organization in 10 years' time is still a hierarchical beast, you'll find it outrageously difficult to retain staff. Maybe you'll trick a couple of staff members, workers to work for you, but retaining them will become increasingly difficult. It's of course hard, because the older you are, the more you climb the career ladder, the more you get obsessed with the hierarchy itself. But ultimately, that's well on the way out. And so now, half of them are already of retirement age. You're dealing with the most tech-savvy retiree population that there is. They will all stay put for the next decade, the baby boomers. They will still continue living in their middle suburb family homes. That's where you find them. It's all but guaranteed. But who cares about the baby boomers? The most important generation over the next decade are Gen X. Finally, the forgotten generation, the tiny Gen Xers born in the 60s and 70s, they will see their time in the limelight. It's about time. Huh? We always just skip them. We talked about generations, simply because they're so small. You know, when they were meant to be born in the early 60s, contraceptive pill was introduced. That kept the lid on things. Halfway through, when they were meant to be born, no-fault divorce was introduced, so no unhappy siblings were added to the families. And the 70s were a decade of low migration intake. So you're forever the small underdog, the middle child. And so we just skipped you when we talked about generations. But that's a mistake, because there is a level of seniority built into leadership positions. Already, every single state premier is a Gen Xer. You become CEO at 54. You become premier or prime minister in your mid-50s as well. That is your age your age bracket, dear Gen Xers. That means that Gen X values get amplified. Gen X are, of course, a very pragmatic cohort when you're dealing with them. You know, this is a pragmatic generation that researches every feature of every leaf blower they purchase to death. So when you deal with your Gen X politicians, your Gen X leaders, your Gen X clients, don't use fluff, don't use marketing lingo, don't use narrative and moralistic language. No, no, no. It's always facts, data, features. Baby boomers, millennials, you can be a bit moralistic. That works. With Gen X, no, 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 please don't. They will really double down on work-life balance because they were the first generation where moms worked. So they're the first generation that was called the latchkey generation, came home to an empty home, no parents there. And so they really doubled down on work-life balance. Gen X men are the only cohort in all of Australia that are less likely to become an entrepreneur than we would statistically expect them to be. Because you don't get time with your family if you run your own business. So we know that. Also, they will really double down on gender equality. They were the first kids to see their mom enter the workforce, the first bunch of people that think it's normal for women to be part of the workforce. So we will make absolute fast-paced progress in gender issues over the next decade. That is all but guaranteed under Gen X leadership. They are, of course, not moving all that much as well because they're already in a family-sized home. If they are playing their cards right, they can afford to upgrade their homes. But most of them will stay absolutely put where they are. They will probably are willing to go back to the office as well, Gen X, because they're in leadership positions where they're much more needed. But the middle managers, the millennials, they'll be almost impossible to get into the office, which means that knowledge transfer, which in organizations becomes increasingly difficult, because usually the young Gen Zs were meant to just learn on the job from millennials that still have a bit of technical expertise left in them. As Gen Xers by now, you have no knowledge about Excel, about the upcoming software anymore. That is in the younger generations. You're now more in the strategic jobs. So organizations need to be very, very switched on about their knowledge transfer, the knowledge transfer strategy. You need to create much more purposeful events to get knowledge from your millennial heads into the Gen Z heads. It's an absolute crucial. And obviously technology plays a role here as well. The next generation down the track are the millennials, also called Gen Y, because they always ask, why? They're the young folks obsessed with purpose. They had it well growing up because they were the kids of the baby boomers. They had it all materialistically speaking. And so when it was time for them to choose a career, the world's their oyster. The tyranny of choice is hitting them hard. And so they procrastinate. They take a gap year. But eventually, millennials needed to make a decision about their careers. And what do millennials do when they're confused, when they can't make a decision? They go on YouTube and they type in career advice. They're bombarded with the same narrative every single time. I was once stuck in a 9-to-5, working for the man. Hamster wheel of work, hated every second of it. But then one day, I looked deep inside my soul and I discovered my true meaning, my true purpose in life. And then I created a startup. Sure, it was hard at first, but I doggedly persisted. Eventually I succeeded. Now I jump out of bed in the morning and I run to the office because I'm so excited to go to work. And if I can do it, so can you. So this narrative, every single TED Talk that I've ever heard, is doing two things to our young Australians these days. The first thing is rather cool. It leads to more young people having a go. It leads to having a go at creating a meaningful, purposeful business. That's wonderful. I like it. It might even lead to the big players, big corporates to take their corporate social responsibility issues more seriously. That's also cool. But more than anything, this is leading to what I call work image issues. That is the office equivalent to body image issues, where we look at these sexy models and bodybuilders on Instagram and then we look at ourselves and go, could be better. In Australia, we literally have millions of young people that are in absolutely cushiony 6-digit jobs that are miserable. I think there must be more to life than doing spreadsheets for Telstra. and why are they so obsessed with work having to be meaningful? Well, Because the meaning of life must come from somewhere, doesn't it? Their grandparents, they sought their meaning of life from God. That's easy enough. Doesn't work for the atheists. Their parents got meaning in life from their families. Well, that doesn't work if you only start your family in your mid to late 30s, if at all. So no wonder that millennials look for meaning elsewhere. They were called the experience generation, that is traveling, that is apparently foregoing materialistic desires just to experience stuff. Your yoga trends, all of this comes from this trend. No, of course you look for work having to be meaningful. Huh? You hang out there for 10 hours a day anyways. Might as well make it meaningful. But how likely do you think it is that we can perfectly align our 14 million jobs with 14 million individual passions and desires? Yes, there will be an overlap, but it won't be all that big. It is an absolute recipe for disaster to force this narrative upon our young workers, our young Australians, that you are a failure if your job isn't meaningful. We're already seeing millions of young people on antidepressants. The census asked for the first time, do you have a medically diagnosed, not self-diagnosed, medically diagnosed chronic health condition? And you got to pick your favorite health condition. And 25% of women aged 21 years of age said they have a medically diagnosed chronic mental health condition. 5% would have been shocking. It is ludicrous. It's a lose-lose situation. Yet again, I have no solution for this. I am only telling you this because this is the biggest customer group. This is the biggest staff group that you have in your organizations. I want you to understand their pains so that you can at least speak to those pains. The next generation down the track will slowly enter the world of work right now, Gen Zs. These are an interesting bunch of people because they're the only people that never ever look up at their iPhone and go, whoa, I can't believe I lived without that. Because they never did. They always had the whole information that mankind ever created readily available at their fingertips. And it changed the way they think. They think global warming first, local bike path second. If you want to reach them, tell them how your small thing fits into that big thing. That's the way to reach Gen Z. The next generation down the track, you see how this goes, Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z. We run out of letters in the alphabet. I'm not making any workforce predictions about babies just yet. That's a bit presumptuous, if not illegal. So for better or worse, this is the Australia that you are servicing over the coming decade. It is a growing country, plenty of opportunity, but we're changing values. We have generations with new values entering new stages of the life cycle. These are the people that you're servicing. Overall, I hope I got a sense across, a bit of a sense of optimism across to you. It's a wonderful, wonderful place to be doing business in. I do, of course, have a social media channel for every generation. For the baby boomers in the room, I'm writing in The Australian. For the youngins, I'm on TikTok. And I guess for you lot, that's the big QR code. That's LinkedIn. Thank you very much for your time today. Really appreciate it.